All right, let's start from scratch, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Welcome to another recording with your host, Leonok. And I am here with bright and beautiful morning star. He's a little dark this morning. Grimmy! How are you, Grimmy? Yes. Well, hold on, Grimmy. We haven't introduced the show properly yet. I know you're so raring to go. But no, welcome to another episode of Songs and Sorcery. It is I, your host, Leonok, as I've said before. Honestly, I can't say it enough. Honestly, Leonok. Say it before you go to bed for me. Ooh, I want to feel all that energy, tension, fear. I feed off of it, I'm sorry. And other things. Like I said, I'm here with my co-host Grimmy, and we've gone through some things, honestly. And no, Grimmy, you cannot say that. Okay, no, not on camera. Okay. I know you have a lot to say, but honestly, I don't think it's probably the right time to say it. We have a set plan. No, we're not going to talk about that today. I mean, we could, Grimmy, but that was like last week or so. Was it? I mean, do people really care? All right, you know I love you. All right, so before we get into that, I'm sorry you had to see that. I had a little conversation just now with Grimmy, my co-host, who's a brilliant and lovely contributor to the to the podcast here, I guess to the episode. But before we get into that, Grimmy, I haven't forgotten about you. I want to congratulate everyone from getting, through their week, through their day. I'm happy you all are able to see this sort of thing. I am sort of pulling things together. I'm getting rather excited because I'm going to be uploading these episodes on Spotify at some point. And I sure hope it can go rather swimmingly without any sort of problems, honestly. And I am sort of trying to get it to work together. I'm sort of thinking about what to probably put on to that site. Honestly, probably everything. Why not? Especially to giggles, and sometimes someone will listen to me without being able to see me. I don't know why. I mean, I do all of this for you to look at. So I don't know, but it's going to be by the same name, Songs and Sorcery. Pay attention to Spotify. It may pop up perhaps in a few days, perhaps in a week or two. I'm sort of working out the things, the cover art, I guess it doesn't matter as much, but making sure I find the archive. I have so many things I've said in the past 3 years. It's been 3 years since I've started this thing. And I'm so happy. And am I getting any money out of this? No, because people don't think I'm worth paying for. But let me tell you something, okay? I don't care. I don't care. I give everything freely, whether it's information, whether it's love or other things. So I'll just leave it at that. No, but recently, we had a special day, Memorial Day, and it was something that I'm getting to that, Grimmy. It is something where a lot of people sort of just don't really think too much of it. It is a day that we recognize that these were people that were here one day and gone the next. And a lot of people have this impression, this idea that, well, they wouldn't want us to mourn them or anything like that. But I think that's perhaps an oversimplification and a very generalized statement. There are people who are perhaps no longer with us that would love us to remember them once in a while, because they were family or friends at one point. And I think by us not taking the time to do that, just one day out of the year can be perhaps a bit of a disservice, I think. So it's something that I don't really think we should be forgetting about. So let's just get into the topic then, okay? Because Grimmy's keep telling me about it. I'm like, okay, Grimmy, we're going to talk about it. I want to sort of, sort of warm them up a little bit first. You don't just, go. I mean, maybe you do, whatever you're at. But I like to, some foreplay, at the very least, some foreplay. But no, Grimmy's very, I want it now. Give it to me raw and hard. I'm getting a bit excited, honestly. Let me just get to it, okay? So Memorial Day, or in memoriam, or perhaps remembering the dead. Any of those sort of things, I think, what we want to talk about are what we want to be talking about. That special day just passed about a week or two ago. The days just fly by for me. I'm sorry. Being 300 years old tends to do that to you. So, but yes, it is something where I it's something that I started doing here recently. Where I came from, the series was sort of around, so there was no need for this sort of memory, but there was no need for a memorial service for those who died before, because where I come from, they're just around. There's like the spirits come in and out. They say hello. They say their goodbyes. They live their afterlives. But here, I notice that things are a bit different. When people leave us, they tend to stay gone. They don't really pop in to visit. At least not for everyone who isn't able to perceive them. And I've noticed that sort of this world of yours seems a bit cold, a little bit. It's not really welcoming of the dead as much. But honestly, that's a cultural thing. If I were to go to different parts of this same world, it's not like that. Even though they can't see these people that have long passed, they still do services and offerings, things like that, and things of that kind to sort of, show their departed loved ones or cared for that they still care for them, and that they're still here for them, and that they are, anxiously waiting for their arrival or for their approval or anything else. And that's a topic for a different video. I have an idea. That sort of just took my mind to a different place. I'll ignore that. And I don't want to sort of beat around the bush, but I feel as though no one really gives a shit. No one really seems to give a shit about the dead, or at least by what they went through, or perhaps what they're going through now. People have this idea, because of the belief systems in place within this country, that once someone dies, they are whisked away to some other land somewhere in the afterlife, and you can never really contact them again. But you are supposed to stay with the certainty or the uncertainty of where they are because of who they were as a person. And even though we cannot we cannot agree to a certain extent as to what happens beyond the grave, it is still something that I think we need to find some common ground on. The people that are worth remembering, the people that are not. But it's also the people that are still alive that I think deserve remembering as well, that we perhaps may not have thought about. So yes, Kuremi, I will get into it. The subject of today is called memorials, and it is something that is not just for the dead, but for those that are still living, and I'll explain to you why. So, in tradition, memorials have been held across the globe, this globe, for countless generations and eons to commemorate the lives of those who are no longer with us. And there are ceremonies and services done to appease the spirits. Even for the spirits like gods, for example, if they lived among men for a certain time within a certain country or region, or perhaps for animals, spirit, things that were like guides to us and then become spirit guides when they move over. But here, it is done to, remember those who we've loved mostly. And for many times, it's sort of conflated with Veterans Day. And it happens to me every now and then because they're sort of similar days, about 2 months apart or so. But it is something that I think is important. Well, I think maybe a bit more months. But it is something that I think is important for us to sort of remember that, they are still the dead that we care for, the dead that we loved. But, the memorial thing is for everyone, and the Veterans Day is for the ones that gave their lives in service to the country. There's sort of a separation between the two, technically. However, they can both still apply because they're people that either we knew or whatever that, we are no longer have and we want to sort of give a remembrance for. But Memorial Day is mostly for something that is generalized. It's a lot more general. It's not just for people in service, because that's what Veterans Day is usually for. Veterans Day is also for those who are currently alive and serving. And we are sort of commemorating that day for them as well, for the sacrifices they made to ensure that this country sort of keeps running. Now, this isn't in any way to sort of, I guess, go deeper than it sort of has to be. We understand that, the countries may or may not have the people's best interest in mind or that of others, but these people are simply just doing what they are told. It is what their job is. When you have a soldier, he's supposed to do what his commanding officer tells them to do, even at the cost of their own life. And even though the commanding officers don't want them to pay their lives, they sort of do that kind of job knowing the risks of the work. And they still do it anyway. Someone has to. And for that, we are eternally grateful. When it comes to Memorial Day, it is a day that I took, for example, this past, I think, Memorial Day, to commemorate the lives of those that I cared for, and for the lives of those that I love, and even for the ones that I never knew. And I think for the longest time, many people in the occult circle sort of realize this, and we know this, but I wanted to touch on something very specific when it comes to Memorial Day. and that is to remember our past selves and who we used to be, and whether or not we were greater or better or not than how we used to be in the past. Memorial Day has often been used as a day to commemorate the dead, those who are no longer with us. But I think it should also be a day where we also try to commemorate where we came from, who we were in the past and how we've grown from it. Or perhaps if there was a piece of us that perhaps was lost. Like, for example, if you feel as though your childhood was robbed or something special from your childhood was taken from you, or perhaps a special event or something else that sort of changed you as a person and then made you to someone else, I think that in itself is also something very important to remember. Because honestly, presently, the living don't really have a memorial service for themselves, something to commemorate them and for what they have done. Some people, for example, they do like special tributes and dinners for people that, for example, um, let's say they sort of quit a certain habit, be it smoking or sobriety. They have things like that. We sort of do commemorate their victory and their persistent work at sort of conquering that sort of, um, you know, affliction they had before or addiction. But I feel as though many of us that are adults right now, and every day that moves on, we leave a piece of ourselves behind. We sort of leave the present of what it was, where we were in that moment, what we felt in that moment, and now we're in a new day. And as the years go by, those sort of memories can sort of, thin out and sort of drizzle. Unless, there are some that remain burned into our cerebellum, into our minds, that sort of carry on with us. And these are memories that help us to be better and to attack things from a different perspective. And I think before, when I did the video, I think on remembering or the power of memory or the influence or whatever it was, I believe I may have mentioned something about how we constantly, every now and then, we think about the horrible things that happen in our lives. It sort of brings us to a state of depression, and these are things that sort of affect us very deeply. But I remember telling someone that, well, the reason why we hold on to these things is because it is a way for our mind to remind us to do better and to help us do better. The mind simply carries information. It is a storage bank. It has the ability to retain certain amounts of knowledge, how something looked, smelled, tasted, touched, or felt, and I guess what happened around that sort of thing. It's a way for us to, it's a sort of an evolutionary thing. It's a very biological thing. It's sort of what, computers or robots do, for example, to better themselves. It's how they learn what steps to take to walk properly, what steps are needed to then run properly, what to avoid when you're walking or what to not interact with when you're on a journey of a certain kind or time or length. And so when it comes to things like bad memories, these things tend to persist because they left an effect on the brain, and the brain is trying to figure out the best course of action that enables a person to live longer, to live better. And so the reason why you remember, no matter how traumatic it is sort of a way that it's sort of an involuntary response that the mind does in order to better understand the situation. If it understood the situation that took place to be something unfavorable to you, that made you feel bad, disgusting, that made you feel in danger, it will learn that and retain that in order to prepare the body to react accordingly, to allow you to keep surviving and to not fall victim to whatever happened to you in the past. The same thing goes for the good things that happened as well. When someone goes through a marvelous event, you're ecstatic, you're excited, you're happy, the amount of ecstasy you feel, the pleasure. The mind also retains those things as well because it understands that it is important to sort of maintain those feelings because it was pleasurable to the body, and it can enable healing and satisfaction. And it can also help with that in tow to keep yourself level and to help you sort of elongate your life because you sort of want to keep going. So it sort of helps reinforce that biological, sort of code you have to keep living, to keep persisting in life. And so when we come to the thing like the memorial service, or when we talk about in memoriam, we are talking about the things in our lives that had an impact that we no longer possess. And I feel as though honoring ourselves as people is very important because we have changed. We are different people. If it is someone that perhaps you don't want to be anymore, you have to have a service of, We call it a service of flame, where I come from, where we sort of burn the things that are no longer for us. We sort of write them in a sheet of paper or anything like that, a parchment, or you put them up in the air or pull them out of your mind and you toss them into the fire for the fire to consume. And so you can sort of make an effigy of your past self, or I guess a part of your name, and you will put indicators on it as to who you were, who you do not want to be any longer, who you are no longer. You're sort of putting it through the door of fire, passing, you from one state to another state. And you sort of, um, sort of toss it aside if you no longer want to be that way. You would put all your afflictions, all the habits, all the addictions you have, the things you hate that you no longer want in your life that caused you pain at any point, you would then imprint upon this object and then toss it into the flames for it to be consumed. That is something that we did. Something that's, I think, an idea to do now, I think. And you have the freedom to do and work with it how you will. I feel as though it helps. Um, and when it comes to something where you want to sort of keep persisting or grow into something, you can do the same sort of thing. You could perhaps make a puppet of some kind, in sort of like a silhouette of dirt, if you like. You can put a thing of dirt, you can put a puppet of some kind. You put lovely things around it. You write beautiful things about yourself into this puppet, and then you put it into the soil with some dirt. You put your favorite seeds of whatever you kind, it could be a bird flower or anything else, on your puppet or in your puppet. And then over time, that seed will then grow into a beautiful flower. But it has to be nurtured as you have to be nurtured. But the idea is that it sort of reflects and imitates who you are as a person and the aspects of yourself that you want to grow as a constant reminder. And if should the day comes where the plant withers or perhaps dies, a new seed, if it's properly taken care of, will then keep growing root. But it sort of has to be taken care of like you have to take care of yourself, because no matter how good of a place you are now, you can always go back to where you were, even if it's a place of pain, a place where you no longer want to be. And so it's important to sort of keep that in mind. You have to nurture yourself as you nurture a plant. The more you do that, the more beautiful the flower appears, and the greater the stalk the plant has, and the greater in stature the plant is in general. Its potency, its effects are heightened, and it can do gracious and beautiful things for you. But I think it's something that we have to sort of try out, because I feel there's a lot of people sort of just going through life not valuing themselves like they do the people that passed. And so I sort of, want to sort of, start a sort of tradition as well, maybe for next time or perhaps for Veterans Day, but that day is special for them. But I want to sort of create a day where we sort of remember ourselves, our past selves, and we do this ritual. You separate the wheat from the chaff, the things you no longer want, the things that you hate or bore, and the things you do want that can promote nourishment and healing. You want to separate those two things, burn the things that are no longer useful, and help nourish the things that are. And I think that's an important thing to do. So in this moment, I want to sort of remember the person you were. If you feel as though you perhaps were a person that wasn't perhaps in their best life then, perhaps there was someone that was clouded, that felt pain in their past, I want you to sort of remember that child, to close your mind to everything else. Remember who you were as a person as much as you can, the things you did, the things you enjoyed. And I want you to remember the thing that caused you pain, that caused you anguish, that caused you anger. Something that you felt as though changed you or wormed its way into your life and heart, and that caused you to be in a state that you are not satisfied in. I want you to recognize that, to identify it. And so that is a thing that you will burn. Not the child, obviously, but you want to burn the thing that caused you pain. But you have to be wise in this action, this decision, because these things, if they proved useful to you, like I mentioned before, the mind was able to learn from it and help better itself from it, then you can help nourish the positive aspect from that horrible thing that happened to then bring you to a better space. But if you feel as though the thing that caused you pain wormed its way like a parasite into your fruit, into your flower, you then have to sort of toss that flower then into the bin, into the fire. And then whatever seeds you can derive from that flower before you toss it in, I want you to take. Because the flower is a sort of representation of your current state. It's surviving, it's thriving as best as it can, but it's still weak and it still suffers pain. I want us to sort of remember and to sort of call to mind the emotions you felt when you sort of had that experience. Your childhood. Remember that child. Remember the innocence that child possessed, the happiness, the dreams that child had, and how either the dreams weren't fulfilled or were taken from the child. That child is what I want you to remember. The seed, the flower that bloomed out of the garden. I want you to sort of remember that person. Remember yourself and apologize to yourself, to ask yourself for forgiveness of having lost the thing that made you so vibrant and bright, or perhaps the things that you did that sort of made that happen. Some children don't grow into beautiful flowers. Some children grow into harsh weeds and brushes in trees that are carnivorous, that will hurt others. But it's not always their fault. A seed will grow according to its environment. You are the seed. And depending on where you were placed within the soil, how you were nurtured, will ultimately have an outcome into who you are as a person. This is something that I think we need to take into account. So whenever you have the idea in mind to have a memorial service for the dead, do that first if you need to. And then later, I want you to sort of, take this effigy of yourself and you're sort of helping it grow, but I want you to sort of then take time to then remember thyself. Remember who you were as a person. Remember that child, that kid that was full of life, that was full of magic, that was full of dreams. And what part of yourself you feel as though has died. I'm fortunate enough where in my circumstance, there were things in my life that were hard. But for the most part, I sort of was able to cultivate a child that was able to bloom into something fabulous. But it took time and it took pain, it took grief at times. But it's something that I sort of always kept in mind because the people that often, even the older folks that are sort of energetic and happy and always willing, they were someone that never sort of abandoned that child but brought the child with them along the journey. And that child, as they got older, that child grew a bit older with them, but still retained the light and the warmth it had and was able to fill that person's life with joy. But not all of us were sort of fortunate to have that circumstance. Some of us had to sort of leave the child behind so that we could undertake something a bit different, perhaps a bit harder, because there's some work that children can't and mustn't do. But they forgot about the child in the other room. Another child is alone, sleeping on the floor without a blanket, without anything nourishing. And it's a child that was dormant with dreams, now perhaps dying, or perhaps dead already. But as witches, as magical practitioners, as people with access to magic, we know that it has no real rules, that there's always time and power to resurrect the things in our lives that we want to see again, things that brought us joy and happiness, like what people wish for when they do memorial services. And so I want us to sort of take that time. It's a beautiful day to do. When the day came, I had an idea in mind what I was going to do. I went out to get a white rose, very symbolic, and very known for its intentions and things of that nature. When I went out to collect the flower, I noticed that the sky was quite gray, but the sun was shining. And it was sort of like, I can't really describe it. It was sort of like your spirit was sort of peering through the veil, I think. It's almost like a strange time when it's raining but it's sun at the same. It's almost like a transitional period. You're sort of in the middle, you know. You're sort of a space in between. The rain represents the veil, and the sunlight represents the conscious mind. I guess the eye piercing through. It's sort of an event. It's strange when it happens. It's beautiful. But when it happens, a rainbow usually appears. It's sort of a simulation. We take it to mean something a bit more profound where I come from. But if you understand what I'm saying, that is sort of what I sort of get out of it. But like I said, this thing was happening. I was, of course, dressed in black, things that, symbolize, and I'm aware of what I'm doing. And it's his Memorial Day, and people don't really sort of question that much because some people are aware of what day it is, and it's a day of remembering. And there are some people that have such. I want to start this tradition, so I set it up my thing. I had my beautiful candle set up in one area, the rose with the white, musical instruments. I had lavender, I had incense here, things like offerings to sort of, appease whatever spirits were there. And I was right by the cemetery when it is. Not inside, I was by it. So things were probably watching, things were probably listening. But I had a special place and I was, playing instruments and singing songs and playing them that, were things like tributes to the dead. And I was sort of, prepared the area. I called forth the dead. I gave a service for them, the things I loved about them, knew about them, they commemorate about them, how I knew them, called them by name so that they know who I'm talking to. And I thought it was a rather nice service because it's something that I haven't done before here. And it is something that I think we should probably try to do. You might get something good out of it. It doesn't really hurt, really. But again, most people, they just go about their lives. They're like, fuck it. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not dead. I remember it. But it's not just about the troops on Memorial Day. It's about everyone who has died and who is no longer with us. Whether it's your grandparents, your father, your children, even things like your dogs, your companions, best friends, lovers. Dedicate this day to them. Do things that they love, things that they cared about, things that you shared with them, so they can be with you at least for those moments and know that you still care for them. Because I think where they are at, it sort of gives them a boost to know that someone still remembers them, that they still have a tie to that world that still loves them and cares for them. And I think that's important. So, without further delay, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I do apologize this episode wasn't sort of as, glamorous or as happy or as giddy or anything else. But I thought, you know what, this thing just happened, and I feel as though it is important for us to sort of remember that, these sort of things are important for us to grow from and to honor, because I feel as though we don't really do it enough. I want to thank again my beautiful, lovely co-host Grimmy for his input, for reminding me about how special this day is and why it is important, and how it is something that I should bring up with the rest of the rats here on this channel. So I want to urge all of you to remember to, be safe, to practice safety, whether it is sex or magic. To wherever you are going, make sure you're having your proper protections in place, nothing too grand or crazy, but just general. Make sure you are observant. Make sure you are prepared for any situation you may encounter. Know where you are in the region, where you can seek escape if escape is required. I urge all of you to sort of go out there and sort of take back whatever thing you feel as though was taken from you, but to do it wisely. Take some chances, be daring in some aspects, learn to embrace that dreamy, brash part of yourself that perhaps you left behind. Summer is upon us. It is a time of celebration, a time of heat, of sun, of nights, of passion. It is a time that we have to sort of, take advantage of the life that is now present, a life that is, verdant and ready to experience. The seasons represent stages of our life. Spring is like birth. Summer is like, adolescence, adulthood, fall is like that, fall you sort of, dying, and then winter you sort of die and it sort of starts again. It's a cycle of remembrance, of continuation. And so something that all of us sort of, just try out in life. Try out new spells, try out new music, new food, new people. Do a whole bunch of things that make you happy. Go to the restaurant you always wanted to go to. Go to that park. Go to that fair. Go to that theater. Go to watch that movie. Go to the amusement park. Do everything you want to do because life is short and every moment of our lives is worth remembering. Okay? I want you to remember above everything else to be kind, rewind, reassess, and practice in excess greatness. It is I, your host, Leonok, my co-host, Grimmy. We're happy to be here, and we hope all of you have a beautiful summer and a wonderful day. Goodbye. Until next time, and remember that you may be seeing us on Spotify soon, so stay tuned. Okay? You're still here? Go away! Enjoy life. Goodbye.